Billy, look, thank you for helping Parents Victoria out. This is our 100th year of operation, and this is an overarching parent body for all state schools in Victoria. And we're thrilled to have the Father of the Year in Victoria.
Thanks,
here.
It's really nice to be down with you.
And not only that, but the leading paediatrician at the Children's Hospital, which I just think is fantastic for parents because it'll give them a sense of confidence about what is going on.
Yeah, hopefully.
And
great.
Parents Victoria have worked through very carefully a number of questions that I'd like to address and for you to think about and inform parents about what you think might be important.
Yeah, wonderful.
So the title is Beyond Academics, the Relationship Blueprint. So really, relationships are where we live. It's where, and schools are of course compulsory, so every kid has to go to school, and when they go to school, they're moving into a relationship playground that in some places is structured, in others it's not. So we have mental health problems, we have kids finding it difficult to attend school, so school refusal and things along those lines. We have behaviour and even well-being supports and so forth to help them with how they manage the relationships they have at school. And then they have to learn. That's what schooling is about, so they're seeking academic progress. I'm just wondering how you think, what is a safe relationship for a kid at a school?
Yeah, safety is an interesting thing that for our brains to be able to use their potential and their capacity for things like building social relationships or learning, they have to be safe and feel like they're in an environment where there's no threat. And it's interesting thinking about, we don't decide if other people are safe, those individuals do. And one of the mistakes that we make is we tell kids that it's fine, you're okay, and if their sensation in their body is, fight, flight, fawn or freeze, and you're telling them, no, you're fine, you're telling them their body's wrong, and it can be quite confusing from a young age. And the experience the child's having needs to begin from one of safety and making sure that we have an understanding that kids always feel safe, and when they start to feel like they're unsafe, they have pathways of support that they can go and get, which is, as I know you believe too, is all based in relationships.
Yes. So if a parent had to actually start with a 4 or 5 year old and come up with a template and help them establish quality relationships, we don't have a template as such, and I think we really need to have one, and that's why Parents Victoria and I have done relationship-based education to try and find a template, and you and I have discussed it previously, where we have 5 elements: trust, forgiveness, integrity, hope and compassion. Parents, I'm now a grandparent, but it was difficult working through to convince each of our 3 daughters, who were quite different in an emotional sense and how they took, and I know Yvette's starting school for you in a year's time, and so their personality also means that they go to relationships in a different way. So how could we help parents, and what sort of advice would you give to parents? And I know in your terrific book, 10 Things I Wish You Knew About Your Child's Mental Health, you go through 10 things that I think are really important, but you start with attachment. So I'm just wondering, where should parents start in reference to, because it's the first time that their child is going to go into an unstructured relational circumstance with new adults, children of different ages, and there'll be a sense of fear. There's no question.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously, we talk about attachment and we talk about temperament at the same time, and thinking about attachment is, how safe am I in the world? And am I loved? Do I deserve that love? Those type of things. And I think that one way that's helpful is to think this is not set in stone. The temperament, the emotional sensitivity we have to the environment is set genetically. I have a sensitive temperament. I was born with that. I'll always have that. People might say I have big emotional reactions to things that they don't think are a big deal. About 20 to 30% of kids exist in that group. But our attachment moves and changes through our entire life. As you know, it's almost a subconscious way that we move through the world. And the simplest way to explain it is that you either have secure attachment or insecure attachment. And the blueprint for our relationships are built through our early caregiving years, not set in stone again. No. But if you have caregivers that are sensitive, responsive, predictable and consistent, then you are likely to feel safer in the world. Because you know, if I'm struggling and I signal that, someone will come towards me and they'll be sensitive and responsive to what I'm doing, what I'm saying, what my needs are and what's going on. And educators have the capacity to have this beautiful transition where kids leave the home and then start to experience that in daycare or kinder or school, that adults are sensitive, responsive, consistent and predictable with me more broadly than just my home. And then that helps them transition and feel safe. And that attachment research, as you know, Bowlby and Ainsworth and then all the people that came after them that built that through was really cross cultures. It showed us that that way that we engage with each other is so important. You know, as I've spent more and more time talking with you, I have a greater trust. You know, you talked about trust. I have greater trust in that it's going to be a positive experience, that if I say something that's a bit vulnerable, you'll be sensitive and responsive to me. I know you've showed me predictability and consistency in listening, you know, supporting me, checking in with me. And kids over time need to see that the majority of their relationships are like that. It also teaches them how to be with others and understanding that kids can also be safe, you know, trusting relationships for other people too is a really wonderful thing when you start to really care about peer relationships in primary school.
Yes. And how do we teach children to manage constructively in a kind way the mistakes that they make that affect others and that others make that affect them? And how do we also teach adults who are on a daily basis dealing with children, treat the mistake making as an opportunity to actually improve the relationship rather than perhaps not do so?
Yeah, it's a wonderful question, and I think that a lot of us grew up in different environments where, say, adults wouldn't say sorry or that I made a mistake, and so you see that as a coping mechanism, and it's an unhealthy one because then you have no growth and you have no perspective taking. And you mentioned the word empathy, and we know that empathy has a developmental trajectory that starts in the first year of life. But it only really becomes something that is pro-social and starting to develop around 4 or 5 years of age.
The starting of school.
The starting of school, yeah. So when we think about how do we give opportunities in low levels of distress, low levels of failure, in safe relationships and environments to explore that and do it in a way that doesn't induce shame, doesn't make kids or other people feel like you're a bad person because this has happened, and understand it's an opportunity to validate whatever experience they've had, but then explore beyond that and say, I wonder what it was like for that other person.
Yes.
What can we do in the future to make this an enjoyable way that we communicate with someone, play with someone, express our needs, say you're too close to me, I want my turn, I'm upset with you. And those skills need to be taught explicitly to kids by getting down on their level, connecting with them, making sure they're regulated so they feel safe, they've got their full cognitive capacity and ability to learn, and then guiding them with whatever level of support they need to succeed. And then we drop and back off the intensity and duration of that support and watch them and make sure they still keep succeeding in whatever specific thing we're working on. It can be simple things like sharing.
Yes.
It can be other things like emotional regulation, help seeking, conflict resolution, caring for others. Like, these are all specific skill sets that kids don't just learn naturally by being in the world.
No. So what you're talking about is that we need, and the second element of a quality relationship is forgiveness, which is really not a religious term. It's the enabling element. So we're looking here at giving for, because that's how forgiveness is. We're giving for the child. And the child is giving for themselves because the relationship that they are establishing with themselves underpins and enables every relationship they form with someone else.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And it also makes me think about whether it's forgiveness or respect is very similar. You know, parents or teachers will say, how do I get these kids to be able to say sorry or respect me, and we have to do it to them first. We have to let them experience it as the person receiving it.
Yes.
And, you know, that's a hard thing for some of us because we think we come from a background of, you know, an authoritarian who's, because I said so, I don't have to explain myself, I'm the adult.
Yep.
But the problem is that's quite unhealthy for us and in relationships, and being able to be vulnerable and say, hey, I made a mistake is a really powerful thing to do for kids because it shows them the internal workings of our mind as well and how we try and repair mistakes that we've made. And then it gives them a safe pathway to think, maybe I did stuff up. Yep. And it's not that I'm a bad person. It's just that we make mistakes. And I actually now have a chance to validate that, apologise, but then do it better the next time and feel successful in myself and the things I make an effort in.
Yeah. So a role that parents can play here, and teachers in particular, but parents can play here, is to teach children how to authentically apologise. But on top of that, how to accept an apology, to give some hope.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I don't like this kind of, you have to say just tokenistically sorry, you have to tokenistically say thank you.
It has to be authentic.
Yeah, and you have to understand from a very early age, you know, I've got a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and we talk about how it makes the other person feel, you know, grateful, it makes them feel happy, it makes them feel like a good person. And, you know, try and understand that instead of just robotically saying these things. Like we can, if kids understand the why of things and what it feels like for the other person, it helps them understand. And we know this developmentally in early primary school entry is when they start to be able to conceptualize that other people have different experiences to them. It's a really important thing for empathy, but also conflict resolution, communication styles, inclusion. Yep. People are different, but we can form relationships and partnerships to succeed together.
Yes. And one of the really interesting things in the relationship that you would like every child or every person to have is that in any relationship, no one would harm another.
Yeah.
That they would treat others as they would wish to be treated themselves. And that's the third element, which is integrity. And you and I have discussed previously, it's really, really important that kids understand that they'll make a mistake. How that's managed won't harm them. It'll be constructive, so it enables them to overcome the error they've made.
Yeah, I mean, one thing you and I agree on is there's no bad kids. And I think what we want to be making evaluations about is what was the intention, what's going on for this kid. Because when we make a mistake, sometimes we can look at the behaviour. Yep. But looking at behaviour should only ever be a window into what the experience of a child is. And if we can, it's interesting to think about that from the perspective of unconditional positive regard and how important it is to make sure that we always expect the best of all of our relationships in each other.
Yes. So how can parents work with teachers on this? What role do parents have? Because all the research tells us that if parents are disconnected to schools, that in fact the child struggles academically, in engagement, and even attendance.
Yeah, well, it goes back to what I was saying about that consistency and predictability, and it has to exist across environments. You actually only really need one person at a school. And Tom Brunzell from the Berry Street Education Model talks about this beautifully, is every kid needs a champion. Yep. Every kid needs someone at school they can go to and say, I'm having a really tough time. Yep. And that person knows, cool, we're going to peel off. I'm just going to sit down somewhere with you and I'm just going to hold space with you and I'm going to listen. You know, I'm going to validate whatever experience you're having. And if we decide what we need to do is problem solve, I'm going to help you problem solve the situation or experience that you're having and you're struggling with. Parents, you know, it's interesting. I sit in clinic and hear a lot of parents that are struggling with schools. And then I meet a lot of educators who are really struggling with parents. Yes. And I say exactly the same thing to both of those groups. I say you have to form a partnership. Yep. You have to get together and understand that everyone is trying their hardest, but just coming from different approaches to support this child so they succeed. And the problem I think that happens is that a lot of us grew up in environments where whenever school spoke to our parents, we were in trouble. Yep. And that was the only communication form. And I think that we need to take pressure off educators and broader school communities to have the capacity to just build healthy relationships with parents. The same as kids. Like kids need to be tapped on the shoulder by people that actually care about them on the playground. Yep. The playground, you're the one who's helped me learn this. The playground is where everything happens. Like a teacher coming up and going, hey, Billy, how was your weekend? You know, how'd you go in soccer? Yep. That shows him that he cares because he's choosing to do that. You know, I understand his role is he has to teach me maths. But if he comes over and taps me on the shoulder and says and checks in with me and shows genuine interest in me, then I have a sense of belonging there. That helps with my safety. That helps with my academic performance, my social skills and everything. And so if we can have consistency across that where parents and educators come together or caregivers and educators come together and say, how do we form partnerships? But you don't form it in times of distress.
No.
So you have to proactively think about this school as a part of our community. The hospital I work at, every place I've been, that is the community space. The community owns the school.
Yes.
You know, not the teachers, the principals.
No.
And they'll be healthier communities if the community comes in and says, this is our school.
Yes.
This is our space.
Culture really directs. It controls behaviour. So if the culture is one of aggression and so forth, then for the insecure kids, of which there are at least 40% of the population, it is a toxic place.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where we think about a lack of, you know, if you're conditional, if you get punishments when you don't behave, we withdraw our support if you don't perform the way we want you to. Those are conditional transactional relationships. Yep. And then people go, well, I'm not actually valued here. It's only when I do everything they want me to. And that's not the deep relationships that we want our kids to come to expect from the people in their world.
No. And of course, the intention behind, we want every child and every teacher, every parent, every person, we want them to form a relationship on contribution, on what they can give rather than what they can take.
Yeah.
And that's fundamental. And I don't think any parent would want their child to be known in the social setting in which they live as a taker in a relationship, because unfortunately, you and I have spoken before, they end up alone.
Yeah, definitely. You know, it increases their risk of being socially isolated, becoming bullies, you know, poor academic performance, lack of respect for authority figures, all of that stuff becomes quite challenging for those kids.
Yeah, and it's really hard. So parents and teachers need to work together, not work apart. They need to develop a trust of one another. And we often find that the time is not taken to develop that. And it's worthwhile doing it.
Yeah, and I think one simple thing that we talk about is like the majority of the interactions that caregivers and educators have, positive ones, that are celebrating the child, being hopeful about the child's future, thinking about how do we support each other better, because then the challenging ones are more likely to be successful.
Yeah. Interestingly, in schools, we have classes and then recess and lunch but in the classes there's a structured environment. So the relational circumstance is probably under some sort of control and understood by kids that in this class you behave this way and in this class, and that dancing is really important. The unstructured areas is where many of the insecure kids, but even the secure kids, struggle. So this is at recess and this is at lunch times. And in a school context, it's usually known as teachers are out on yard duty. We're attempting to get the duty business out because it's the social opportunity for teachers to teach relationships. Help. And so that's the point you were making about someone coming and just tapping and say, how are you going today? Or meeting students as they are going back into class saying, how was lunch?
Yeah, or understanding the developmental stages that friendships go through and helping a child who doesn't even know how to start a conversation with a peer that they're not friends yet, or doesn't know how to have depth in a friendship and go beyond a superficial conversation, and scaffolding that is a beautiful way, just how we teach kids how to ride a bike. We give them the level of support, we're positive, we celebrate it when they fall down, we help them. We need to understand that with all the social and emotional components of child development, we have to take opportunities to run alongside them, give them the support, celebrate their success, help them up when they fall down. It's the same analogy. We're very good at teaching kids how to ride a bike like that. we're not very good at teaching kids social and emotional skills in the same way.
Yeah, and using the bike analogy, when they start, we have trainer wheels.
Yeah.
So, and we take them off in an appropriate way and so forth. So we probably should be looking at trainer wheels for relationship establishment.
Well, that's the sensitivity and the responsiveness bit, because if the kid, say it's training wheels that you're using, if you take them off and the kid can't ride the bike anymore, is terrified, you go, cool, it was too soon. Yep. And it's the same as like we bring one kid over and it's a really scaffolded play opportunity at home where you feel safe doing games you're familiar with lots of surveillance. Yep. Great. You go to a birthday party and you melt down because it's too much for you. Cool, we're not there yet. We're not ready to take those training wheels off. Let's keep riding with the training wheels and get you to the point where we skill up to the point where you can be in an unstructured, crazy birthday party with 30 kids running around wild.
Yep. I think it's the sense of belonging is what kids want.
Yeah.
And that's where they're moving. Because whether we like it or not, in a primary school, we've got 5-year-olds through to 12-year-olds or whatever it might be in a secondary, 13 through to 18 or 19. The relational interactions that kids have, they want to be important in a relationship, they want to be valued, they want to be liked.
Yeah, well, a sense of belonging is one of the most protective factors against childhood adversity that there is. And participating in community traditions is another one of them. 2 non-parental adults take a genuine interest in me, that's another one. And a lot of those things can happen at school. So sense of belonging is really important. A sense of belonging means this school values me for who I am, what my strengths are and what I care about. And it's a lesser group when I'm not a part of it. And a lot of kids don't walk through school gates feeling like that.
No. And I've done some work with UNESCO on bullying and harassment and so forth, but bullying really is just the inappropriate use of power in a relationship. So someone has power over rather than power with. And when we're working in a school, we want to enable every person to have power in their own relationship matrix that they have at school. And, they make mistakes and they fumble around and so forth. And that's the beauty of how we relate with one another. Yeah,
we need to challenge hierarchies. We do this in clinic as well. We move away from this idea that I'm the expert and we have people come in and they will say, how can I help? My role is to help you. I get paid to help you. And thinking about that as any professional that works with kids, our role is to support this child. We get paid. It's our job. We're not doing it out of kindness. And we need to understand that it's a privilege. It can be hard. But when we share power and when we share authority and we make decisions together and form genuine partnerships, we're much more likely to succeed.
Yes. And with regard to success, learning is a relational circumstance.
Yes.
That's it. So if the relationships are sound, are secure and of real quality, then the learning process is managed by all students. Now, some have more difficulty picking up quickly. I stammered badly, and so I was. If people wanted to be nasty, they'd ask me to speak, and I was, and that hurt.
But you found a way to ride that bike, didn't you?
Yes, and we all develop our way through the jungle, if you like, which is the relational circumstance. However, how can parents really help kids that might have some sort of impediment of one of another?
Yeah, well, it's interesting in terms of if we think about developmental vulnerability or risk, we're seeing an increase. So the last 3-year collection that we did last year showed that there are more kids entering school with developmental concerns than there ever has been. If you look at it from a mental illness perspective, we know that about 1 in 7 kids in a primary school will have clinical range mental illness. We know that less than half of them will access clinical support. So what we're trying to do is go into school communities and say, how do we put really good preventative factors in place, like what you're talking about, safe environments, sense of belonging, sensitive responses to emotional difficulties, seeing behaviours as expressions that kids are struggling. And then how do we bring in the knowledge of how we actually support these kids, whether it's mental health first aid, co-regulation, how do we set up good ways for kids to express their emotions and learn about emotions, good role modelling of emotions through play, storytelling and all those things. And that really helps the kids perform academically as well, because there is going to be so many kids in every single classroom that have developmental vulnerability, mental illness, childhood adversity, and all those things are developmental trauma is the biggest predictor of adult mental illness that we have. And 50% of adult mental illness starts before we're 14. So you're essentially talking about the primary school journey.
Yes, you are.
Is when a lot of this is decided. And so our best chance for kids to succeed through those years is if we have a really good understanding of where we should be investing our energy. And I would argue most of it needs to go into emotional and social development.
Right.
So there's no real point teaching kids how to read and write and do maths if their journey through school is one that is turbulent, they don't feel safe, and they they develop dysfunctional coping mechanisms socially or emotionally.
That allows us to draw it all together, because in essence, this is what I thought came through very clearly in the book that you put there to assist parents to understand the mental health of their children. But I think it's really, really important that if we don't get the social and emotional stuff right, learning is inhibited not only for the insecure kids and those that might have learning difficulties, but it's also, it has an impact on those that feel as if they can rather than they can't, so the secure kids.
Yeah, well, the idea is, that it makes the educator's role easier, more rewarding. They feel safer. Like that's what my PhD showed. They feel more confident in identifying and supporting kids with emotional and behavioural difficulties, but also they felt a greater sense of competence and safety in their own work. And we know the biggest reason that an educator leaves the profession early is behavioural difficulties in the classroom, because they're not trained well for this and they're not supported when it's going wrong. So if we can understand that and better support the educators as a collective community, educators are the most important profession that there is, then we can change the world. We can change the experience of all these kids, our experience in building healthy relationships with them. It's this beautiful opportunity, and I move away from a diagnosis-based practice and I spend more time figuring out what this specific kid's needs are, what they're struggling with, and how we support them to develop that skill or accommodate them, because it's something like dyslexia that they're always going to hit a wall if we try and get them to learn it in a certain way. So we accommodate, just like with reading glasses. But whereas there are other things...
Or hearing aids.
Yeah. But there are other things where, you can expect that a child will eventually be able to take the training wheels off and be able to succeed in emotional regulation, but they're just not there yet and they need more support in that skill development. And so that's the beautiful thing about the work that I do. And we think about, it's not if the kid will learn this, it's when.
Yes. So you're about to be one of the parents that have your first child to start school.
Yeah.
What are you thinking about?
Yeah, I'm thinking about it comes back to my temperament. I'm anxious about it. I think one of the traps we fall into as parents, especially if we've had difficult childhoods, is that this is you see yourself as a child and the kids that we love and support, and thinking about, no, I need to make sure that I'm judging off her and I'm meeting her needs, not my unmet needs when I was a child, and thinking about, how do I set her up for this to be a really successful journey? And I think about the parenting style research, if I'm honest. I think about how I have a high expectation of Yvette, my beautiful 4-year-old daughter, but I'll always start with warmth. And we face challenges together, we fail together, we succeed together. And my role is to, whatever comes, to be standing next to her, looking at it with her, not to be standing in front of her, getting in her way, making it harder for her, moving all the obstacles out of the way. My role is just to journey with her as a guide.
Yep. And you're going to hand her over to adults that you don't really know well, and you're going to hand her into a relational complex where there are older kids and peers and so forth. How would you build a confidence that this is going to work and I can work together with the school?
Yeah, I do it through skill development. I watch her in social environments and I see where she struggles, and then I build her capacity in, safer, less challenging opportunities where I can scaffold all the support and help guide her through. Instead of trying to get her to stop doing something, I think about, instead of snatching, how do you share?
Yep.
Instead of always stepping out of the way because someone tries to push past you, how do you hold ground confidently and say, I'm next? You know, all of those skill sets. How do I teach her how to understand the emotional expressions of others? How do I teach her that it's okay for her to have emotional difficulties and express them and help seek when that's happening? And those are the things that I've noticed that she struggles with, and we work on it. We work on it, you know, maybe not every day because of how much I work, but most days I try and find a few minutes to work on that stuff through opportunities with trusted relationships, through role play and imagination, through storytelling, through sharing my own experiences and difficulties with that. It's a really important component that I watch her. Now, Charlie's going to have a completely different
because he's different
journey. Yeah, so this idea
male.
of like, I parented them the same, why did they turn out differently? You shouldn't parent kids the same. And the way that you parent a child changes based on their journey, what needs they have for that day, that week, that month. You know, so I think that that's what I'm doing. I'm watching her, and she's a very articulate, bright kid, but she, you know,
sensitive.
She's sensitive, and she's still learning her social skills and her emotional regulation. So I guide her through that. And she looks like me, so she's got this wild, as you know, mop of red hair, and I just get down on the ground with her. You know, and I validate that experience she's having, and I give her a window to have an emotional experience, and she learns that when she's struggling, I go towards her.
Yes.
You know, I go towards her and I watch her. I don't, even if she's done something that other people might say is wrong, I go towards her because I need to connect with her, co-regulate her, and then guide her towards the expected behaviour that's going to be pro-social and healthy for her. But I have to do those steps first.
Yeah, and that's very important. And it's important that her teachers know that this is what you do, and this is how you'll work with them, and if they've got concerns they can come to you. And so the teacher-parent relationship is absolutely gold if it works, and it's not if it doesn't.
Yeah, it can be really hard, and everyone's working really hard, so I think it's just not about trying harder, it's about trying a different approach.
Yeah, thank you. Parents Victoria are really indebted to you, and we think this is
wonderful.
Really,
it's always beautiful to spend time with you, John.
Really important that parents know that they can play a really positive role in any school environment. So it's been wonderful, Billy. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
and I
Tom.
would like all parents, really, and this is not a plug, all parents need to read this because, as well, Hamish Black said, there is no such thing as a manual for being a parent, and there's not. But I reckon this comes bloody close. So
yeah, you can hear Hamish saying it. He's a beautiful man for doing that. But yeah, come over to we do the Social Enterprise Guiding Growing Minds does lots more than just a book. We also have a pop culture parenting podcast. We come into school communities, come into workplaces, we come into sporting clubs and teach these skill sets to communities based on what their needs are, not just universal out of the box programs.
Yes, well, this is why Parents Victoria are very keen to have you do this for us, but also this is why we put together relationship-based education, because if we don't get the relationships right, then we inhibit not only how teachers can teach, but how students can learn and what involvement parents can have. So thank you, really.
Beautiful.
Wonderful.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.